shines your eyes, so it makes your eyes stand out more.
I'm Bridget, I'm 31. I'm married, I have 2 daughters. I'm a captain in the army, and I was born male and I'm female now.
Captain Matthew Clinch is a decorated soldier, a career officer who's bravely led men into combat missions. Now Matt is fighting a new battle to stay in the Australian Army as Captain Bridget. By his side is his wife, Tammy.
I saw my partner suffering really badly and I helped him. And it was hard though, because especially at that stage, I was helping destroy the outside bit of the man I loved.
A wife has lost her husband and his mother, Deirdre, has lost her son.
How does it feel as a mum to go through this?
Well, I guess I don't know. I'm just doing it for the first time. I just do one day at a time.
Compared to all the other hardships you've been through in your life, where does this one rank?
No, this takes the cake, definitely.
I knew when I was a kid that that I would have rather been a girl, and I remember pretty clearly thinking, you know, if I had, you know, 3 wishes and a genie, the first one would be, you know, to give me a girl body.
Growing up, Matt fought his feelings, playing boy games, joining the cadets and eventually the army. It was January 1999.
And you weren't surprised at all when he joined the army and wanted to go into battle?
I wasn't surprised because when he was very young, he used to write quite gruesome stories about killing and war and spaceships, and Mum was horrified. I said, Mum, that's normal boy stuff. And he decided that's what he was going to do. And he stuck to that, he never deviated.
He served 2 combat tours of East Timor, was decorated twice and promoted to captain in 1 RAR, the Royal Australian Regiment.
What sort of weapons were you working with?
Pretty much all of them. All the typical stuff, your Steyrs, your belt-fed Minimise and Mag 58 machine guns, you know, all the different grenades and rockets and things, and I even had a chance to call in artillery and fire the actual artillery pieces themselves.
It really does sound like boys' own adventure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a guys-only thing.
He was an infantry officer, so he and his platoon of 30 soldiers, they're trained to fight a war and to shoot people, basically. I mean, if you want to come down to the very basics of it, that's what they do.
In the year 2000, Tammy met Matt at Duntroon Military College, where she was a trainee officer.
Tell me about Matt. What did you fall in love with?
I fell in love with someone who was strong and had principles and ideals and would stand up for them. We just clicked. We connected on intellectual, emotional, physical, as well, like all different levels. And I just knew after, I think it was only a couple of months, this one's worth keeping and I want to keep him.
I've never connected with another person the same way I've connected with her. It wasn't just a keeping up appearances thing, you know, get a masculine job and, you know, try your best to be a guy and, you know, find someone to marry, that sort of thing. That totally wasn't even on my radar at that stage.
Within months, they were married and they had 2 beautiful daughters. Only Matt knew his secret, and for years he battled his inner conflict in silence. Then 2 years ago, he summoned up the courage to tell Tammy.
We often talk about very serious things snuggled up in bed. I don't know if everyone else does that, but we do. Matt basically said to me, I've always felt like I should have been a girl. And of course I remember that. I didn't know what it meant, you know, like I didn't.
I thought I'd lose my family, and, you know, be a social outcast.
I said to Matt, do you really, really have to do this? Like, is there anything else that would make you happy? And I said, what if I bought you one of your, you know, dream cars that you've always wanted? And I know that it's either a BMW M3 or a Porsche 911. I said, what if I sold our unit and bought you one of those? Would you not have to do this? And I knew that this was really, really real because he said, no, sorry, chicken. Like, I'd love those cars, but I still have to do this. And I got scared in those first couple of months when it was so hard. It was hard for me personally, it was hard for us as a couple, and I could see it was hard for him coming to terms with, this is who I am and this is the only way to make it different.
In August of last year, Matt was diagnosed with gender identity disorder. 1 month later, he told the Army he wanted to become a woman.
How did you tell your superiors and how did you tell your unit?
I told the people that I worked with a letter.
What did you say?
I used a bit of an example of, you know, imagine if you were sort of in a crowded place or a social event and you just felt out of place, uncomfortable, like that wasn't where you should have been. And I said, you know, it's kind of similar to how I've been my whole life.
When you were a man, were you gay?
No, I've always been attracted to girls, and it's just quite confusing to think, oh, I want to be one too. And, you know, that for a long time, that really didn't make a lot of sense.
No. Brilliant.
Last November, Matt began his journey to become Bridget and started hormone treatment paid for by the Army.
That's the way, it's mixing in now.
Yeah.
As his voice changed and his breasts grew,
Oh, I do just need a cuddle.
he faced another issue, telling his young daughters.
Uh-oh.
Bottom.
Whose bottom's that?
Mine.
And who are you with?
Look at you.
Bridget.
You're so tiny.
And that's me with Bridget again.
Brianna's calling you Bridget right off the bat. Did she always do that, looking at these photos?
No, initially it was still, that's my dad, or that's how Bridget used to be.
Me. Bridget.
It makes me happy that it seems like she's handling it really well. Getting your pictures are getting much better.
She's a wonderful parent. She is a loving parent.
This isn't your typical family. Their children are seeing their dad disappear. And soon Bridget will have the sex change surgery to make the swap complete.
Hey, here we go.
As confusing as it is for Tammy, she says Bridget is a much happier person than Matt.
But when I look back at how he was those last couple of years before he told me, he had really sort of shut down emotionally. He was very closed off. I thought maybe he had depression or something. And I thought whenever we figure out what that something is, then we'll be properly happy. And then we'd have our happily ever after. I just didn't know. Didn't know that this was what it was. I didn't know that this is what it would be for him to be happy. But she is. She really is. And that's why I can say, well, I know it had to happen because I can see the difference.
Do you see your son?
No, that looks like somebody that I don't know.
This is the first time Matthew's mum has seen her son as a woman.
You are most worried about the fate of his children.
I am, because I know how things appear to children and affect children, and these children are not going to come through this unscathed. In a million years, if you'd have said what is the most bizarre thing that could happen to you, I never would have thought of it, because Matthew had a very healthy body, and I thought he's going to mutilate this beautiful body that I'd watched grow. He was the most beautiful child. Just tell me what could be worse. There's nothing.
This is worse than if he died.
I think so. I think it's more painful because there's never going to be an end.
It's a pretty harsh thing to say.
I know it is, but it's the truth. It's the honest truth.
He says he doesn't have a choice.
That would have been easier to accept if I'd have known 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'd understand that it's just very sudden and very strange and very difficult to get your head round.
How has your family reacted?
Not that well. Yeah, there's not a lot of acceptance there.
It would have been a simpler solution for me to be dead.
On the other side of the world, in Scotland, Abigail was once one of the British Army's finest combat soldiers. As Captain Ian Hamilton of the elite parachute regiment, she served in the Gulf War, Bosnia, Afghanistan and Iraq.
I went into the army because I wanted acceptance. By doing that, I was able to put Abby in a wee box in a corner.
Like Matthew, she led men on the front line. Like him, she suffered gender identity disorder and for years also kept it a secret.
Well, the big change in my life came on my third tour in Afghanistan, where I'd been away on operational duty for more than 2 years by this stage. I just didn't want to come home. I reached the point where I was actively seeking to get myself killed out there, because it would have been easier for me to have died out there and come back in a coffin without anybody ever having to know about my problem.
Abby almost got her wish. On her last tour, she was blown up by a roadside bomb and medevaced home. It was life-threatening and life-changing. Over the following months, Ian finally surrendered to Abby.
I just want to be a woman. What is wrong with that?
Abby wanted to stay in the army, but they made it clear she wasn't wanted. She's now a policewoman in Glasgow.
I faced from my regiment rejection that lasts to this day. Although I have paid an enormous and massive price in that it's cost me my career, my life savings, my home, my marriage, my family, everything in life, I would still pay it because I wasn't happy. But more than that, I was utterly miserable. Bridget's going to face a battle on 2 or 3 different fronts. When you do go down this line, you ain't going back. Particularly the surgery. You know, when the fella in the gown gets the scissors out and he does that, you know, you can't stick it back on again. You're done. So I'm Abby for the rest of my days.
Are you at all scared of the surgery?
A little. It's significant, but, you know, I'm kind of... I'm looking forward to how things will be after that, and you know that's the only way to get there. Right.
He's never going to be a woman. He's never going to give birth. He's never going to know what those hormones feel like. I wish he could feel that if that's what he wants to be, but he can't.
The delicate and irreversible operation will cost around $30,000. In June, the Army told Bridget they intended to discharge her on medical grounds, and that meant they wouldn't pay for the surgery. 1 month later, they reinstated her and began a review into whether they should pay for the sex change.
Why should taxpayers pay for a sex change?
This is something the medical people in the Army recognise as a medical condition that has a set course of treatment. And instead of treating Bridget and letting her just get on with her job, they somehow came to the conclusion that this was different and she didn't have the same entitlements as every other member in a uniform. Matt was a good Army officer. I think Bridget will make a better Army officer. They just need to realise it.
I believe there are a number of transgender people who are serving within the Australian Defence Force at the moment.
On Friday, the Army did a sudden about-face. They now say they will pay for sex change surgery for soldiers like Bridget. And according to Major General Craig Orme, he won't be the first to serve as a she.
We've always maintained that to be a transgender or transsexual or intersexual individual is not a barrier to serving the Australian Defence Force. Surgical procedures and the medical treatment that any member of the Australian Defence Force gets is paid for by the taxpayers. There are people out there listening to this story who'll think we've gone too far. There'll be other people who think we don't go far enough. The bottom line for us is that our people count to us. We spend a great deal of money training them, and the investment we make in our people, we believe, is well worth the recovery of providing medical support to them.
Bridget's surgery could happen as soon as April. As soon as it does, there's another hurdle. Because same-sex marriages aren't recognised in Australia, her marriage with Tammy will no longer be legal. That's their next fight.
I love her. I want my life with her. I'm a better person when I'm with her, and hopefully she's a better person when she's with me. And we will find a way. You know, when she hugs me, it's because she loves me and I love her.
The same person.
Yeah, and the other stuff, it's a bit harder and a bit, you know, it's very private, but we'll work it out. Not sure yet exactly how.
And really, you tried everything. You got married, you had kids, you joined the army, you got into infantry, all trying to be a bloke.
Yeah, I gave it a good shot. And yeah, it just didn't work. There's not much more I could have done to try and be more blokey. It just didn't happen for me.